Hi, PentaxTips here. We're going to cover an overview training of the Pentax K-70. Please see the timestamps in the description to jump ahead to specific topics. First off, the K-70 is a 24 megapixel in-body image stabilized DSLR released in 2016 as Pentax's entry-level APS-C camera. The camera features a max shutter speed of 1/6000th of a second, a max ISO of 102,400, internal Wi-Fi, and 6 frames per second continuous shooting. Despite being Pentax's entry-level offering, the camera is equipped with weather seals around all points of water and dust ingress. This feature is usually withheld by other companies until you reach their enthusiast or pro-line cameras, so it's an incredibly impressive and appreciated feature to see on this entry-level K-70. For the front of the camera, Pentax uses the long-lived and long-loved K-mount. The lens is removed by pushing the lens release button and rotating counterclockwise. Line up these dots on the camera and lens mount to connect the camera and a clockwise rotation until it clicks. One of the many benefits for photographers using the K-mount is how long of a production run the mount has had. Since they haven't changed their bayonet mount and kept the same lens sensor register distance since its inception, all vintage lenses can be used on modern Pentax cameras. Here is a link to a video describing how to get vintage lenses working on the K-70. On the left side of the camera, top button will pop the flash. The RAW FX1 button, this is our first customizable function button, which is preset to accessing the RAW file formats. A bit more on this later when we talk about customizing. Further down, we have a switch to select between auto and manual focus. Beside that, a rubber cover. This is the mic port for using an external microphone. Right side of the camera, the K-70 has one card slot which sports up to the SDXC format and the USH1 standard card. Slide the SD card in and it will click in place. Under the SD card compartment is the HDMI and USB ports behind this rubber cover. These ports will allow you to connect your camera to a TV or a computer for either image viewing or image transfer. However, this camera does not support internal battery charging through the USB port. On the bottom of the camera, there's another compartment with a little latch to access the battery. This camera uses the DLI-109 battery, which is the same as many other entry-level Pentax cameras before it. And here is our standard tripod screw mount. For the top of the camera, this mark here indicates the camera's sensor location for determining the register distance during macro photography. Up here we have Pentax standard hot shoe mount. And if you wear glasses, you can dial in your prescription strength with the camera's diopter located at the top of the viewfinder. This will allow you to use the camera's viewfinder without needing to wear your glasses. If you don't wear glasses, you still have to ensure the diopter is set to a 0 correction. Next, our main dial, and we'll cover more of this later. Next to that, the Wi-Fi startup button, which can also be configured as the secondary FX button. Look for our video linked here to get the Wi-Fi working on the K-70. Our exposure compensation and green button, more on that later. And we have our on-off switch located as a toggle around the shutter button. Toggling one more further will access the camera's video mode. Last up is our front control wheel. This is a secondary control wheel. Most other camera brands don't even give you a second control wheel until you're in the enthusiast level cameras. Again, a nice feature added to an entry-level camera. Which takes us to the back of the camera and the rear control wheel. These two control wheels are the main control wheels used to control your camera settings. The K-70 has a nice articulating screen. It's not a touchscreen, but it feels very robust and solid. Turns around for variable angle shooting. Our D-pad features settings for our flash, our white balance, drive and timer modes, and an ISO button. More on these settings later. We have our info button, which displays a customizable control panel for easy access to user settings. Nice because it limits menu diving. And our menu button, which opens up all the possible settings for your camera. Up top, this AFAEL button stands for autofocus as a secondary back button focus option, or auto exposure lock. This will take the exposure settings at the time of you pressing the lock, and it will keep those settings no matter where you point your camera. We also have a live view button, which is a shared button with a trash can icon. And over here is our image review button. To take a picture, press the shutter button halfway down. You will hear focus confirmation, and a full press takes the picture. You can feel the tactile bump as the shutter is released. The picture will briefly appear on the rear screen for what's called an instant review, but if you want to see it again, you'll have to hit the review button. You can navigate around the image with the D-pad and zoom in with your rear control wheel to check focus. Zooming all the way out will place you in a foldering system that archives your images. To delete an image or a folder, use the shared blue trash can located at the top left. Live View provides a real-time preview of your exposure on the rear LCD. To activate Live View on the K-70, press the LV button at the top left. Just something to be aware of while you access the different shooting modes. Live View uses a different autofocus method than through the viewfinder. While using the viewfinder, light is bounced off a mirror in the camera to a dedicated phase detection autofocus system. While using Live View, the mirrors are held out of the way, allowing light to directly hit the sensor. Since Live View bypasses the dedicated phase detection, it instead uses a contrast detect system, which is generally slower to achieve focus than while using the viewfinder. So if you're shooting any action, anything moving fast, you'll definitely want to use that viewfinder phase detection focus system. Instant Review is the preview on the rear LCD that appears immediately after taking a shot. The amount of time that the preview is displayed for is under Menu, Camera Icon, page 5, down to Instant Review. This can be set from 1 second, 3, or 5 seconds. Hold, which will display the image until you tap a button, or completely off. If you are confident in your shooting, selecting less time or off can save battery power as your camera does not need to render the image for preview. Next, you also have options for what is presented to you during Instant Review. We'll turn these on quick and explain what they can do for you. And we'll take a sample picture. The Zoom Review allows you to zoom into your images to check focus, up to 16 times in fact. Bottom left, we have a trash can icon to delete your images. The Save Raw Data option, you can save raw data with a tap of your exposure compensation button. More on file formats later on. Overlaid at the bottom is our histogram. The histogram is a very useful feature that will indicate the brightness of your image along the horizontal x-axis. Left is pitch black and right is perfectly white, and the amount of that brightness level is represented on the vertical y-axis. A histogram can help a photographer know that their image is being properly exposed. When the data is all squished up to the left or the right, it would indicate that the image is being over or underexposed. In fact, we can press the up button, we can display the RGB histogram to get a sense of what's being recorded in each color channel. We'll zoom into this part of the image to explain highlight alert, also known as blinkies. Upon instant review, it will flash red on your preview, indicating that the data is being clipped and that part of the image is being overexposed. To access viewing options and image data for regular image review, hit the review button and then the info button. Here we can cycle through standard information, image metadata, a histogram display, RGB histograms, or no information being displayed. Now that setting will stick, and the next time you access your image review, the information overlay preference will remain the same. Further review options are under Menu, Review Icon, page 1. I'm actually going to cover this one from the bottom up. Under LCD display, we can specify if the image is auto-rotated if we are shooting between landscape and portrait. We have some grid overlays to help frame our image. We have our basic highlight alert option, and here's our playback volume when reviewing videos. Quick Zoom is a speedy little function that lets you zoom into your image automatically by a specific factor. Saves you from having to crank your wheel every time if you know you already want to zoom right in to check your focus. We can also select to delete all images here. However, it's strongly suggested to format your card instead of delete images from the card. To format your card or erase all the data, go to the wrench icon number 4. This will allow you to wipe all the data on the SD card and prepare it for all new photos to be captured on the card. Going back, we can also do a batch protect on all images on your SD card so that they cannot accidentally be overwritten. Last, we have a slideshow option. I don't really use this option, but it would be used if you're presenting your images from your camera to a TV via the HDMI cable. Next, I'd like to cover auto exposure metering. Photography is all about light. Metering is how a camera measures light, and we can choose different methods the camera uses to meter light. Metering modes are, again, accessed using the menu, camera icon number 1, and the bottom option is the auto exposure metering. Selecting this option will allow you to choose between the full scene being measured and metered, the center weighted option, which will exclude the periphery from the meter measuring, and then solely center weighted option, which only uses a point in the center to measure the light and meter your scene. For the most part, unless you are trying to accomplish something very specific, I highly recommend keeping your metering settings on the full scene being metered. Just set it and forget it. Now we will cover the settings from the Viewfinder, Live View, and Movie modes. Taking a look through the Viewfinder, the default information on the bottom left, we have our shutter speed, and next our aperture. The focus confirmation will light up in the middle, and next we have the shake reduction status icon. Over on the right is our ISO setting, and as you change other settings, they might also appear in the viewfinder, such as switching between manual and autofocus, or accessing exposure compensation, or popping up the flash. To change the functions, go to the menu, camera icon page 1, we see AF with Viewfinder. The two main focus modes are AFS and AFC, stands for single or continuous focus. In single focus, the camera will focus, lock focus, and remain focused at that distance. Continuous autofocus will constantly measure focus distance and change its focus to track a subject as they potentially come closer or further away from the photographer. There is also an AFA, letting the camera automatically detect which mode to be in. However, if you know what your subject is, stationary or moving, I would suggest selecting the proper focus mode to match your subject's speed appropriately. Next, we have the active area option. This will allow you to select between using all 11 autofocus points or just 5 autofocus points, select focus points, select extended focus points, or a sole single focus point. Pressing and holding the OK button will allow you to quickly and easily select which focus point you'd like to use, just using the D-pad. Now I think the defaults are fine and recommended for these next 3 settings. The AFS setting allows us to dictate the priority of shutter release, whether the shutter will only be released when there is focus confirmation, or release priority, which will fire the trigger regardless of the focus status. Similarly, first frame in AFC allows us to dictate whether we prefer focus or release priority. Our action in continuous focus allows us to dictate whether we prefer a priority for achieving focus or a preference for high frames per second shooting during continuous focus. Again, I suggest leaving all these on default unless you are in a specialized shooting scenario. However, the hold AF status should be more actively selected. This setting determines how long the AFC will remain at that focus distance before measuring and adjusting the focus distance again. The slower the subject, the longer the hold AF time should be. If you are shooting an AFC, it will be very beneficial to actively adjust the hold speed for your subject accordingly. Here we can see the default information displayed while in live view. Starting from the top left, we see the main dial mode that we're in, then the drive mode, whether we are in a single or continuous shot. Then we have our white balance, currently set to auto white balance. Then we have a little image displaying our preset JPEG corrections. Over on the right, we have our metering area. This little hand here shows on or off for the in-body image stabilization activation. And then we have the classic battery charge indicator. We have 2 virtual horizons that are displayed, which indicate when your camera is perfectly level, both vertically and horizontally. And located at the bottom is our shutter speed, our aperture, our ISO, and the number of our images remaining on the SD card. To change the functions in live view, Press Menu, go to the camera icon page 1, and we see AF with Live View. Here we can select what the contrast detect autofocus uses for focus priority. We can set face detection, track for moving subjects, autofocus selection, manual focus selection, and center point focus selection. Focus peaking is an awesome live view feature that outlines the edges of your scene that are in focus. This helps with manual focus as it becomes very easy to see when your subject becomes in focus. Everything becomes very sharp in outline. If you're using live view, pressing OK will zoom into your image, and the rear control wheel can be used to further zoom in. This is a really great feature with manual photography, and coupling that with focus peaking, we can really nail the focus. The AFS setting similarly allows us to dictate whether we prefer a focus priority basis or a release priority. For a deeper dive into the live view customization settings, go to the menu, camera icon, page 5, go to live view. We can select various grid displays that will overlay our scene. We can toggle the histogram display or highlight alert. These operate as we've previously explained in the instant review section. But it's definitely a nice feature to see in live view, and we get that real-time feedback on how our histogram is reporting. Then last, our flicker reduction hertz can be changed if we're having a problem with any flickering appearing on the LCD. In addition, when you're in live view, press the info button twice, and here we can cycle through overlay displays that appear on the LCD for full standard info, an electronic level, or we can remove all the information altogether. To change your video settings, there's a special movie mode in the menu system that will allow you to select basic video settings, select between full HD or HD and various frame rates, recording sound level, shake reduction, pretty standard stuff, similar to how we've already described. To change the file format type, hit your menu button, camera icon number 2, and select image capture settings. For shooting formats, every shot, no matter what, is taken in a RAW format. This is the complete sensor output. But to share an image online, generally, you'll need to share in a JPEG format. The camera has built-in editing software to edit and produce a JPEG image from the raw data, ready and easy to share. But it only saves a small subset of the data collected from the raw sensor output. So, if you intend to do any editing of your image in post-production software, you'll greatly benefit by saving the raw data and accessing all the original data. Mainly, your options are JPEG format or RAW format, or a combo of the two. When shooting JPEG, you can specify the size and quality of the images that are saved. The camera is capable in shooting PEF RAW, camera's proprietary RAW format, or in DNG RAW, stands for digital negative. DNG is just as flexible as PEF, but I've heard it has greater compatibility across editing programs. So to be clear, when you're shooting RAW format, you'll load your images into a RAW editor, make your edits in post-production, and then export your final worked up RAW file into a JPEG for regular printing or sharing. Now, if you prefer to save JPEGs on the rag, and only once in a while want to shoot a RAW file, this is the time that you use that quick access button available on the side of the camera. Hold that button down and it will swap between save formats. However, it will only save that one RAW file image and it will swap back to shooting JPEG thereafter. For further image settings, go to the menu, camera icon page 1, top option shows custom image. Here you can cycle through many different presets and you can also adjust the parameters of each one. Menu camera icon page 2, third and fourth option for some dynamic range recovery of the shadows and highlights, and some in-camera noise reduction. The third camera menu shows many different in-camera edit effects that can be added to your JPEG images, including clarity, skin tones, and many digital filter effects. Camera icon number 4 shows the in-camera lens corrections. This setting allows the camera to pre-edit out the common lens distortions, but this only works for lenses that transmit information with electrical contacts. So, if you don't intend to shoot in RAW and plan to let the camera do all the work for you, I strongly suggest going through and setting all your custom image preferences. Now let's cover the main dial. You can see our video here on the exposure triangle to learn more about what these settings can do. First, on the main dial, auto mode allows the camera to decide all the settings for you, no matter if you try to select something else. It won't let you override the automatic values. When the main dial is set to AV, that's aperture priority value, the rear control wheel is used to manually cycle through the available apertures for the lens you currently have attached. All the other settings will be automatically decided for you to accommodate your manually selected aperture value. Similarly, TV, that's time value, also known as shutter speed priority, will cycle through the camera's available shutter speeds with this front control wheel. Again, all other settings will be decided for you to accommodate your manually selected shutter speed value. Again, similarly, SV, that's sensitivity value, allows you to control the ISO with the rear control dial, and all other settings will accommodate automatically. TAV is a combination of AV and TV, allowing the camera to automatically select your ISO. For manual mode, the shutter is controlled with the front control dial, the aperture is controlled with the rear control dial, and ISO is selected using the D-pad. A nice feature that will appear when you're in manual mode, a plus or minus 5-stop exposure rule appears along the bottom. The middle indicates a properly exposed image. Negative stops on the left indicate the image will be underexposed, and positive stops on the right will produce an overexposed image. P mode stands for program mode. This is very similar to auto mode. But this time, if you do change a setting manually, the camera will allow you to take control and accommodate your changes. Bulb mode will keep the shutter open for however long you have it pressed down. This is used generally for long exposures that require lots of light. Exposures longer than the camera's preset longest speed of 30 seconds. SCN stands for scene. This is an extension of auto mode where the camera has predefined settings that may be useful for the photographer who prefers using auto mode but wants to inform the camera which scene they're shooting to allow the camera to automatically decide the best settings possible. The camera also has 3 user settings preset on the dial. This will allow the user to configure their preferred settings in any fashion and save them to these locations on the main dial. You can find those settings in the menu under Camera Icon page 5, Save User Modes. In any mode you choose, the exposure compensation can be changed. The exposure compensation will offset the automatically measured exposure to either darken or brighten the image by a user-defined amount of stops. If you find your automatically produced settings are overexposing your images, you can dial in some negative exposure compensation to get the images to where you want them. The green button can be viewed as a reset button. It takes any settings you might have entered and defaults them back to auto recommended settings. For example, resetting the exposure compensation back to 0 instantly. In addition to being a customizable button, the green button is also used for achieving automatic exposures while using manual lenses. Again, see the link here to get that set up on your K-70. Next, let's cover the D-pad. First, the left button accesses the flash settings. We have basic auto flash, we have red eye reduction. Next, we have slow speed sync and slow speed sync with red eye reduction. Then we have trailing curtain sync and full manual flash discharge, selectable down to 1/128th power. Again, pressing that green button will reset you up to full power. The down button on the D-pad will access the white balance. Our eyes and brain automatically compensate for the effects different light sources have on the color of a subject. But our cameras need to be told how to adjust to make those look normal under different light sources. Auto white balance usually gets it right, but under certain circumstances, informing the camera what lighting it's shooting under may yield better color results. So we have multi-area, daylight, shade, cloudy, fluorescent, tungsten, CTE, manual white balance, and also our color temperature. If we indicate what type of light we are shooting under, the camera can automatically fix the colors for you. For the right button on the D-pad, we'll display our drive modes and our self-timer. We can select a single shot. We can select continuous shots, either high speed or low speed. We can select a self-timer for 12 seconds for when the photographer wants to run around and be a part of the image, a 2-second timer to eliminate camera shake when pressing the shutter, or a timer with continuous shots, with high and low speeds and with continuous shot. When shooting a self-timer, the front light in the grip lights up and sounds are emitted indicating the countdown has begun. We also have settings if you have a remote controller for the shutter. Bracketing settings, where a press of the shutter will take 3 or more pictures at different shutter speeds. This will produce an image that is slightly underexposed, an image that is properly exposed, and an image that is slightly overexposed. These images can then be combined to produce a high dynamic range image in post-production. We have M-up, which stands for mirror up, which holds the mirror out of the way, reducing camera shake during image acquisition. We have multiple image exposures, which create single image compositions of many images over a period of time. Can also be used with single shot, multiple shot, self-timer, and remote. Hitting the info button will allow you to adjust the parameters. Last, we have interval shooting, which takes many pictures over time. Interval composite, interval movie record, which can take 4K interval videos. We also have a star stream mode, which is used in astrophotography to create videos of swirls around the North Star with a fade-out effect. The top button, ISO, can be used in any mode. ISO can be toggled to either use single value or to select for a potential range of values, defining both the top and bottom end of that range value using the front and rear control dials. Or we can just select a single ISO to use. One of the best features available standard on the current Pentax DSLRs is the in-body image stabilization. This means the sensor is mechanically floated, and through the combined use of gyroscopes, the sensor is able to counteract a fair amount of shake from our hands. Many other brands' DSLRs do not have in-body stabilization, and you need to buy special lenses that are equipped with their in-lens stabilization. Having the sensor stabilized means that every and all lenses mounted on a Pentax camera are capable of being stabilized, which means that even vintage manual lenses are now stabilized. However, as with all image stabilization, there is minute image quality compromise while the stabilization is activated. If you wish to deactivate stabilization, hit the menu, camera icon page 4, and down to shake reduction, and you can turn that off. As a nice touch, when entering timer options, the shake reduction is automatically turned off. This is since it's presumed the camera is being mounted on a tripod and no handheld shake should be occurring. Another benefit of having an in-body image stabilized camera is the sensor movement can be used to combat the effects of moire. Moire is a very distracting distortion that can appear on your images that display a pattern. Many other DSLRs have an AA filter, that's an anti-aliasing filter, that covers their sensor to help remove the moire effect. However, that filter can somewhat compromise image quality, so some cameras out there simply don't have one. But the Pentax in-body image stabilized sensor can be used to simulate the filter and remove these artifacts. Again, that's menu, camera icon, page 4. First option is AA filter. There are several types of simulation you can experiment with to remove the moire you're experiencing. Be it with a physical knock or an ultrasonic burst, the in-body stabilization can be used to remove sensor dust. Yes, despite the excellent weather sealings included on Pentax DSLRs, any interchangeable lens system is susceptible to sensor dust. This automated dust removal cleaning technique is in menu wrench icon number 5 called dust removal. You can set it for startup and shut down. Gives the sensor a decent knock to get that dust off. If there happens to be a very stubborn piece of dust that needs a bit more force to remove, you can select sensor cleaning options. Make sure that there is enough battery charged in order to facilitate the operation. You can go down to sensor cleaning and the mirror will be held out of the way to expose the sensor. This allows you to use a rocket-style air blower to remove those dust particles. Remember, never use compressed air. Only use a rocket blower or, when absolutely necessary, a dedicated cleaning kit. Again, leveraging that in-body image stabilization, you can select horizon correction. It's under menu camera icon page 4. This will balance the sensor horizontally or vertically to help correct the visual horizon and make sure that it's as level as possible. It's always distracting having a non-level horizon, and this feature can help you get the best shot possible in camera. Pixel shift, yet another benefit of the in-body image stabilization. It's a very powerful feature of Pentax cameras. Pixel shift is used to make hyper-resolution images. Pixel shift options can be found in the menu camera icon number 3. First off, ensure your camera is mounted on a tripod, and you're taking a shot of a scene without too much movement in it. The camera will take a picture, and 4 shots are actually taken. The original shot, then the sensor moves exactly 1 pixel up, 1 pixel over, and 1 pixel down. These shots can then be combined in post-production software to acquire extreme resolution and highly color-corrected images. Another astounding feature available through having an in-body image stabilized sensor is the possibility to take long exposure Milky Way photos and other astrophotography images. You can purchase a Pentax GPS unit that will geotag your images as you take them, but on compatible DSLRs, they can also communicate with the movable floating sensor. The GPS will pick up your geolocation and will provide information to rotate the sensor relative to the star's movement above you. Rotating the sensor in coordination with the stars allows you to soak up as much light as possible while still creating pinpoint stars, that is, without star trails. AstroTracer settings are found in the menu icon page 3 down to AstroTracer. Here you'll be able to turn AstroTracer on and perform calibrations. And yet another tip while you're out there shooting nighttime shots, menu wrench icon page number 2 we'll see that there's outdoor view settings, which can darken or brighten the LCD, and we have night vision LCD display options, which will redshift all colors. This is easier on our eyes and will let them stay more adjusted to seeing in the dark. There's also the indicator lamp options, which you can set to any of your preferences. This camera is very customizable, allowing a user to assign preferred settings to physical buttons. Hit the menu button, camera icon page 5, down to button customization. We have FX1 and FX2 that can be assigned to any of our preferences. For instance, you can reassign that RAW button to be anything you like. Now when you hit that button, it will activate your preference instead of activating the RAW button. The AF/AEL button on the back can be assigned to be a sole focusing button. This will decouple the shutter button from focusing, allowing for a technique called back button focusing with focus recomposition. E-dial programming allows you to assign what your control wheels and green button will do in all the main dial modes. So if you'd prefer a dial to control a different setting, you can make those changes here. Next, the control panel that displays when you hit the info button can be completely customized for the options that you use most frequently. A secret I hold is that I remove most options from appearing in the control panel, and I only have the options that I use completely regularly. Anything I don't access often, I remove from the list. I just don't like the clutter. Some photographers prefer to solely use visual focus confirmation lights rather than a sound indication of confirmation. If you'd like to turn sound effects off, let's go to menu, wrench icon number 1, turn down the volume, or you can just unselect in focus to stop the camera from chirping with every focus confirmation. There are tons of other preferences and settings that can be modified to meet your needs with the Pentax K-70. Last I'd like to cover, if you make all the changes and you can't remember what you did or how to get back, first we have the wrench icon page 5 down to reset. This will put the camera settings back to default bog standards, but it will however retain customized user settings. If you want to delete those custom settings, go over to custom icon page 4, down to the bottom option, reset custom functions. Boom, back to standard settings. Thank you for joining us for this overview training of the Pentax K-70. If you like this content and you want to see more like it, please like and subscribe. Thanks.